let's take a look where we left off. And we were talking about equivalent units of production, which is where we're trying to figure out if we would have completed everything, how many units would we have had? So here, let's take a look at an example. And let's assume that Puzzle Me, that's the name of the company that makes the puzzles, that they have 40,000 units that the assembly department completed and transferred out to the cutting department. For the units to be completed and transferred out, the equivalent units of those 40,000 units, they're 100% complete. So 40,000 units times 100% complete is 40,000 units. So the 40,000 real units is the same as the 40,000 units that are actually transferring out, the 40,000 equivalent units. Okay, now for the 10,000 units, remember they had 50,000 units that were at least started, okay? And out of those, 40,000 units left the assembly department to go into the cutting process. And 10,000 units are staying back in the assembly department. They're 100% complete as far as direct materials are concerned, but only 25% complete as far as conversion costs, which is the direct labor and the overhead. So the equivalent units in the ending work in process inventory in terms of direct materials, we had 10,000 units in the assembly thing, and they're 100% complete as far as direct materials is concerned. So 10,000 times 100% is 10,000 equivalent units as far as direct materials is concerned. Then as far as the equivalent units for conversion costs, we have the 10,000 units are multiplied by the 25% completion rate. So that's only 2,500 equivalent units. So in other words, we could have had 25 fully completed units as opposed to 10,000 units that were only 25% complete. Okay, so this again shows us the flows. We have direct material, direct labor, and overhead goes into the assembly work in process. And then the ones that are done with assembly go on to the next process, which is cutting. Then more direct materials, more direct labor, and more overhead goes into that cutting process. Then when the puzzles that are fully complete from that process now go to the distribution warehouse, which is the finished goods inventory in the general ledger. At the end of each month, I need to do a production cost report for the assembly department and another production cost report for the cutting department. The rest of this PowerPoint video is going to concern ourselves with the production cost report that goes with the assembly department. So the production cost report is made up of 4 steps. First, we have to summarize the flow of the actual physical units. Then we have to compute the output in terms of equivalent units of production. Then we compute the cost per equivalent unit of production. And finally, we assign those costs to the part that's completed and the part that's still back in the assembly department. So this is where we're finally divvying out the costs. we have two terms that we have to know about. To account for means all of the units or the costs that we need to account for. If we're the manager of the assembly department, we need to account for all of the units and all of the costs that went into our department. The accounted for shows what we actually did account for. Now, that should be equal. So if I have 50,000 units that I need to account for, 40,000 of them were transferred out, and I can show that those 40,000 were transferred out, and I can show that there's still 10,000 still left in the assembly department. So now I've accounted for the 50,000. So each manager is required to do this. Now this goes through the information for this example that we're going to go through, and so here we're told that the assembly, and this is just for the assembly department, okay? And we're told that the assembly department has some direct materials, which is glue and cardboard, that are added at the beginning of the process. Then the conversion cost is where the picture is pressed down onto the glued up cardboard, okay? And so that's the whole assembly process. Now over to the right, we're shown that the beginning work in process, we have 8,000 units. This is July, and so the 8,000 units were from June, okay? Those are 8,000 puzzles that weren't quite finished in June. So we need to finish them up now in July. Then we started in July, we started with another 42,000 puzzles that we started from scratch, okay? Then we transferred out in July 40,000 puzzles into the next department, which is the cutting department. So how many ending units do we have? Well, we had 8,000 to start with. Then we started another 42,000, so together that's 50,000. Okay, and then we transferred out 40,000 to the next department. So 50,000 minus 40,000 means we have 10,000 units left over in the assembly department that aren't finished yet. Now, as far as how much percentage of completion those are, for direct materials, the direct materials are always added at the beginning. And so that's what we're told over here. And so as soon as we started those 42,000 units, they had the glue and the cardboard. So the direct materials is already 100% there. They're already complete as far as direct materials. But the conversion costs of the wages and the overhead to press the picture down on so that we can finish assembly, that's only 1/4 finished, 25% finished. Okay, as far as our costs, for the beginning work in process, that's these 8,000 units that came over from June. We have direct materials of $9,800, conversion costs of $39.10. So together, the direct materials and conversion costs are $13,710 of costs that came across from June from those 8,000. Now we added direct materials in July of $130,200. And we also have conversion costs added in July. Direct labor of $22,090, overhead applied of $42,000, which those two together equals $64,090. So we already had this $13,000 to start with, the beginning of July. This was the beginning balance of our work in process account. Then during the month of July, we added this $130,000 of direct materials and $64,000 of direct labor and overhead. So here is step one of our production report. Okay, and step one, remember, was summarize the flow of the physical units. So the units that we need to account for is the beginning balance, the 8,000 units that were already in the assembly department, plus the 42,000 units that we started from scratch. So 8,000 plus the 42,000 we need to account for. If we're the manager assembly, we need to account for these 50,000 units. Now, what did we account for? Well, we accounted for the ones that finished and got transferred out to cutting, and we can account for the ones that are still in our department. So the 40,000 that got transferred out plus 10,000 we still have in our department is 50,000. So we needed to account for 50,000, and we did account for a 50,000. Now, if we had transferred out 40,000, but we only had 8,000 left in our department, that means this would be a total of 48,000. We're missing 2,000 units we can't account for. If we're the manager, we better find out what happened to those. Did they get stolen? Did they get ruined? Did they accidentally get transferred out to the cutting department? We better track those down, because we need to show that we accounted for the exact number that we're supposed to account for. This is the actual production cost report. And just like all of our other things, it has a heading, name of the company, what is this production cost report for the assembly department, and for the month ended July 31st. Okay? So the step one is the unit. So this is only part of our production cost report. This is step one, which is the units. So we show the units that we need to account for, which is the beginning 8,000 units, plus the 42,000 we started from scratch, which is a total that we need to account for of 50,000. Then the units that we do account for, the ones we transferred out, 40,000 units, the ones that are still left in our department, 10,000, those added up to 50,000, which equals what we needed to account for. Okay, so we've taken that information that we calculated, we've now put it into the physical units column of our production cost report. Step two is to compute the output in terms of equivalent units of production. Remember that all direct materials are at the beginning of the process. So for the equivalent unit production for direct materials, we had our completed units, 40,000 times 100% complete for direct materials is 40,000. And the 10,000 units that are left over, well, they also are 100% complete as far as direct materials go. So 10,000 times 100% is 10,000 equivalent units. I add the 40,000 plus the 10,000. That gives me 50,000 equivalent units as far as direct materials are concerned. Now I have to look at conversion costs. Okay? For the completed puzzles, the 40,000 units that transferred to cutting, they're 100% complete as far as conversion. So 40,000 times 100% complete is 40,000 equivalent units for conversion costs. But the 10,000 units that are still in the assembly department, they're only 25% complete as far as direct labor and overhead. So 10,000 times 25% is 2,500 equivalent units. I add these up and I get a grand total of 42,500 equivalent units for conversion costs. What this means is that if I would have just completed, only put in costs of those things I could complete, I would have had 42,500 completed units. Here is where I'm back to the cost report, and I'm now put step 2 on here. Direct materials column, conversion cost column. Here's those same numbers, 40,000 and 10,000 for direct materials.